The Bank of Korea keeps its benchmark interest rate unchanged at 2.5% at the first policy meeting under new governor Shin Yun-song, while signaling the possibility of a rate hike at the next meeting amid mounting inflationary pressure. Culture Minister Choi Hee-young said Thursday that the government aims to grow Korea's K-culture market to 400 trillion won, or some $265 billion by 2030, raising the target from the previous 300 trillion won goal. Two-day early voting for the June 3rd local elections will begin on Friday. Over 3,700 polling stations will open nationwide from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. With Korea's June 3rd local elections just days away, early voting gets underway Friday for a two-day run nationwide. Our Moon Hae-ryang covers everything voters need to know before heading to the polls.
Voters in South Korea will have their first chance to cast their ballots this Friday, as early voting for the June 3rd local elections gets underway. For 2 days, Friday and Saturday, polling stations will be open from 6 in the morning until 6 in the evening. One of the more convenient aspects of early voting is that voters can cast their ballots at any of the 3,571 polling stations nationwide, regardless of where they are registered, a flexibility that isn't available on election day itself. All that is required is a valid photo ID. Depending on where you live, you could receive up to 8 ballot papers, covering everything from regional governors and district heads to education superintendents and local council seats. Those in the 14 constituencies also holding parliamentary by-elections will receive that extra ballot, while voters in Sejong and Jeju will receive fewer due to the different structure of local governments there. It is also worth noting that eligible foreign residents can participate in the local elections. Those aged 18 or over who have held permanent residency for at least 3 years and are registered on their local government's foreign residents list are entitled to vote, though not in the parliamentary by-elections. Thursday also marks the start of a polling blackout, meaning no new survey results can be published until polls close on election day. The elections are the first nationwide vote since President Lee Jae-myung took office and are being closely watched as a barometer of the political landscape. For those who miss early voting, polling stations will be open again on June 3rd, though on that day, voters must go to their designated station based on their registered address. Moon Hae-ryang, Arirang News.
With the Lee Jae-myung administration set to mark its first anniversary in office next week, the Culture Ministry has unveiled an ambitious vision to further expand Korea's booming K-culture industry. Our correspondent Park Kwon-woo has the details.
What started with K-content is now being seen as something far bigger, from tourism, beauty products, and even fashion. The Culture Ministry now says South Korea's cultural industry could grow to 400 trillion won, or around $265 billion by 2030. Culture Minister Choi Hee-young unveiled the new target Thursday during a press conference marking the first anniversary of the current administration. The previous goal had been 300 trillion won, but the ministry says the industry's economic footprint had long been underestimated.
Many foreign visitors first encounter Korea through K-culture and later visit and spend money here. That spending should naturally be considered part of the industry's added value. The same goes for exports like K-food, K-beauty, and K-fashion.
Under the broader definition, the ministry revised the industry's trade estimate sharply upward from $35 billion to $110 billion. The adjusted figure for 2025 alone now stands at more than $71 billion, placing the sector among Korea's top 3 export industries alongside semiconductors and automobiles. K-pop remained a standout sector, posting an on-year export increase of around 32% in 2025. And the government is now preparing an even bigger global push. One major project in the works is Phenomenon, Fan Plus Phenomenon, a large-scale collaborative concert series featuring artists from Korea's 4 major entertainment agencies. The first event is scheduled for December 2027.
In winter, it will take the form of an awards event, while in spring, it will become a global K-festival touring 7 major cities around the world. But depending on the impact and effectiveness, some events could also be held in Korean cities, such as Seoul, Busan, Gwangju, or Jeju.
The minister also pledged to bring in 30 million foreign tourists ahead of schedule by making things more convenient.
Tourists may be used to Seoul, but are still struggling when traveling outside Seoul, particularly with booking train tickets, express buses, restaurants, and accommodation in real time. We'll cooperate more with companies and services so that they can travel more easily and safely throughout the country.
Choi also warned against price gouging in Busan ahead of BTS concerts set for June, saying authorities will respond strictly through legal and institutional measures. With a series of new cultural and tourism initiatives now on the table, the ministry says its second year in office will focus less on planning and more on execution. Park Geon-woo, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung has called for a thorough investigation into the recent fatal overpass collapse and a poor construction of an underground transportation complex here in the capital. Speaking at a weekly meeting with his aides on Thursday, he pointed out cases where safety has been overlooked due to cost issues. He urged the authorities to look into the incidents to find out whether they occurred due to similar reasons. He also noted the gravity of the matter and urged for the need to hold those responsible strictly to account. This week, the collapse of the overpass in Seoul killed 3 people, while controversy has been recently raised over a report that found reinforcement bars were largely missing from the construction of the GTX-A Samsung Station Transfer Center. And the Bank of Korea decided to leave its key interest rate as it is at 2.5% on Thursday, citing ongoing uncertainty over in the Middle East, while also signaling the possibility of a rate hike in the near future. For more on the central bank's latest policy decision, we turn to our Kim Jun-hong tonight. Welcome, Jun-hong.
Great to be here, Dami.
So, Jun-hong, another rate freeze from the central bank. It's quite a long pause, isn't it?
It is. As markets widely expected, the central bank held its rate steady at 2.5%. It was also Governor Shin Yeon-song's policy debut, which put extra focus on today's decision.
The Monetary Policy Board decided to keep rates unchanged at 2.5%. Instead of raising rates right away, we believe more time is needed to assess geopolitical risks, semiconductor growth, and their impact on inflation and growth.
Since lowering the benchmark rate to 2.5% in May last year, the central bank has kept rates unchanged for 8 straight meetings. That leaves Korea's benchmark rate frozen for more than a year, while maintaining the rate gap with the U.S. unchanged at 1.25 percentage points at the upper end. Policymakers cited elevated uncertainty at home and abroad, pointing to risks related to the Middle East and inflation likely to remain above target due to higher oil prices. They also highlighted volatility with the exchange rates, housing prices, and household debt as areas that need close monitoring. The decision was backed by 5 of the 7 board members, while 2, including the senior deputy governor, favored a quarter-point hike to 2.75%. Despite the split vote, Shin said policymakers largely shared the same view on key economic conditions, adding that reaching a consensus was not that difficult.
Well, it does seem like a cautious move, but we all knew a rate freeze was coming. Jun-hong, now the Economic Outlook report also caught quite an attention today with a surprisingly strong upgrade to the country's growth. Tell us more about the growth outlook.
It was actually a quite surprise. So the Bank of Korea raised this year's growth outlook to 2.6%, up sharply the 2.2% forecast back in February. The BOK also upgraded next year's growth forecast to 2.1% from 1.8%, while some optimistic projections suggest growth could surpass 3% if the semiconductor upcycle remains strong. And much of that seems to come down to stronger chip exports fueled by the AI boom, which the governor says helped cushion downside risks.
The Middle East conflict is expected to pose a drag on growth, but stronger semiconductor demand, IT exports, and policy support are expected to help offset some of that weakness.
Yet the latest outlook also signaled mounting inflationary pressure. Consumer inflation is projected at 2.7%, up by half a percentage point. Core inflation, which is a key indicator of underlying price trends, was also revised higher, projected at 2.4%. The bank said higher oil prices are likely to spill over into a wider range of goods.
So with the mix of, upside and downside risks, what path is the central bank likely take going forward,
Right, so regarding that, Shin actually gave a clear signal today. So he said that rates are likely to move higher at some point. But the question is when, by how much, and how far?
This time, the path ahead looked relatively clear, whether looking at inflation, growth, the exchange rate, or housing. Higher rates could help keep those factors in check. The key questions now are when to move, how quickly, and to what level.
Analysts say today's message strongly suggests a rate hike could come as early as July. Some even say this year may not end with just a single increase.
If hikes continue into the first half of next year, rates could even move back toward the 3.5% range. But the key issue is whether the semiconductor cycle can reverse Korea's weak growth trend.
I see. Now, Junong, before we let you go, you mentioned this is the new governor, Shin Eun-sung's policy debut. For our viewers who may not be too familiar with him, who is he? And tell us more about his background.
Well, first of all, Shin is widely regarded as one of Korea's leading experts in international finance.
Right.
He previously served as the head of the Bank for International Settlements Monetary and Economic Department, often referred to as the central bank for central banks. Since his nomination, he has been widely viewed as a pragmatic yet hawkish policymaker. And today's decision seems to reinforce that view as he signaled a potential rate hike.
The fact that the senior deputy governor called for a hike suggests Shin may already see higher rates as a fairly realistic next step. He also appears likely to take a clearer, more principle-based approach in communicating the Bank of Korea's policy direction.
Shin also faces a number of challenges. If rates move higher, he will also have to manage the burden placed on more vulnerable sectors, including small businesses, lower-income households, and industries already under pressure. At the same time, Shin will need to watch for the side effects of tighter policy while keeping an eye on exchange rate swings and housing market risks.
Indeed. Junong, thanks for coming in tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Iran has strongly condemned a new U.S. strike near the Strait of Hormuz, calling it a violation of their ceasefire agreed to back in April, warning it was ready to take all necessary measures to defend its sovereignty. Kim So-young has the latest.
Tensions between the U.S. and Iran are escalating again near the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson accused Washington of repeatedly violating the ceasefire agreed to on April 8. He said U.S. actions in the Gulf, including what Tehran described as provocation against commercial vessels and strikes on Iranian territory, were gross violation of the ceasefire. Iran also warned it was ready to take all necessary measures under the UN Charter to defend its territory and sovereignty. The U.S. military, however, argues that American forces shot down 4 Iranian suicide drones near the strait after they allegedly posed a threat to commercial vessels and U.S. personnel. The U.S. then struck an Iranian ground control station near Bandar Abbas Airport, saying that the strike was an act of self-defense. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, however, says its drones were responding to a U.S. tanker that had allegedly turned off its automatic identification system and attempted to pass through the strait without Iranian authorization. The IRGC said the vessel ignored orders to turn back. Hours later, the IRGC said it carried out retaliatory strikes against U.S. military bases in the Middle East. This latest development came after U.S. President Donald Trump said Washington was still not satisfied with the terms being discussed in the negotiations with Iran. Speaking during a cabinet meeting on Wednesday, Trump said Iran wants a deal, but added that he would not be rushed into one.
Iran is very much intent. They want very much to make a deal. So far, they haven't gotten there. We're not satisfied with it, but we will be. We will be either that or we'll have to just finish the job.
His remarks came after Iranian state television reported details of a possible draft agreement, including the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and a reduced U.S. military presence in the Gulf. The White House dismissed the report as a complete fabrication, while Trump said any deal would require the strait to be opened immediately and remain outside any one country's control. Kim Seo-young, Arirang News.
Now, Israel has ordered residents in southern Lebanon to evacuate, warning of massive strikes as it maintains its offensive against Hezbollah. Lee Seung-ja's report.
The Israeli military has warned all residents in southern Lebanon to evacuate the area, declaring the entire region a combat zone following days of intensified airstrikes targeting the militant group Hezbollah. It marks the first time Israel has issued such a broad evacuation warning since U.S. President Donald Trump announced a ceasefire in Lebanon in April. In a social media post on Wednesday, a spokesman for the Israel Defense Forces instructed residents to move north of the Zarani River, saying military operations would continue across southern Lebanon. The Israeli military has recently stepped up strikes on cities and villages in southern Lebanon after Hezbollah launched explosive drone attacks targeting Israeli troops and northern Israeli communities. On Wednesday, Israeli forces struck the southern Lebanese city of Tyre, just hours after issuing warnings of military action. Airstrikes also hit the city of Nabateh, several nearby villages, and areas further north in the Bekaa Valley. Lebanese health authorities say more than 3,200 people have been killed since the conflict sharply escalated in March. The death toll includes hundreds of women and children, along with healthcare workers. Iran has insisted that the fighting along Israel's northern border be included in any formal ceasefire agreement, while Israel has pushed to keep the Hezbollah conflict separate from broader negotiations. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea is making a final push to secure one of Canada's largest ever defense contracts as senior military and defense officials travel to Ottawa this week for last-minute talks over a next-generation submarine program worth up to $40 billion. Our Tong Hae-rim has the details.
South Korea is making a final push to secure a major Canadian submarine contract estimated to be worth up to 60 trillion won, or roughly $40 billion US. Chief of Naval Operations Kim Kyung-ryul and Defense Acquisition Program Administration Minister Lee Yong-chol attended CANZEC, Canada's largest defense and security exhibition, on Thursday. The visit to Ottawa comes ahead of Canada's expected decision on a project to replace its aging submarine fleet with up to 12 conventionally powered submarines. Kim met with key Canadian leadership, including the Secretary of State for Defense Procurement and the Navy Commander, to discuss maritime security cooperation. Minister Lee outlined South Korea's proposal to local broadcaster CBC, which includes guaranteed technology transfers, domestic supply chain integration, and long-term maintenance based in Canada. South Korea's Hanwha Ocean and HD Hyundai Heavy Industries Consortium is competing against Germany's TKMS, which also reportedly attended the event. Meanwhile, South Korea and Canada also held an official welcome ceremony earlier this week at Canada's Esquimalt Naval Base following the arrival of the 3,000-ton ROKS Tosan Anchangho submarine. Canadian Pacific Command hosted an official welcoming ceremony where senior officials symbolically mixed South Korea and Canadian sea waters.
To our Korean allies, their professionalism, capability, and commitment are exceptional, and we value the opportunity to work beside you and to learn from your excellence.
A final decision from the Canadian government is expected by the end of June. Tong Hae-rim, Arirang News.
A joint live-fire exercise showcasing the Korean military's major combat assets to the public was held on Thursday. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung was at the site. With the enemy launching a surprise barrage attack, the joint live-fire exercise begins in front of hundreds of civilians gathered to watch the Korean military's firm readiness and capability. With a great number of drones and physical AI robotic donkeys playing active roles, the training showed how manned-unmanned integrated systems are being deployed on real battlefields.
This is the very first joint live-fire exercise under the Lee Jae-myung administration, with major Korean military assets taking part, including drones and a helicopter on display behind me.
The joint live-fire drill took place in front of 1,900 citizens in total over 3 days, including Thursday. Such a drill involving the Army's major assets was first launched in 1977, and this year marks its 13th edition. The exercise was not held during the Moon Jae-in administration, but resumed in 2023 under the government of Yoon Suk-yeol on the largest scale ever. With the drill back after 3 years, a total of 1,400 personnel from 27 Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps units participated, with more than 450 pieces of equipment of 96 different types deployed.
Through this joint live-fire exercise, our military demonstrated its commitment to self-reliant defense and its ability to conduct multi-domain operations using drones, AI, and advanced technology. The exercise also showcased the excellence of Korea's advanced domestic weapons systems to the world.
Citizens say they were able to learn more about the ROK Armed Forces.
I learned a lot about our military. I didn't know it had such strong firepower. It was exciting and my heart was racing. The tanks firing was the most memorable part. It was really impressive.
The Apache helicopter flew so close that I felt tense, like it might be coming toward me. It was really exciting.
I think our country is amazing. I also want to become a soldier like that someday.
With the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps operating as one team and integrating manned and unmanned combat systems, the Korean military is strengthening joint operations and enhancing its self-reliant defense capabilities. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News. Global eyes turn to Singapore this weekend for the annual Shangri-La Dialogue, and South Korea will join key allies for the Regional Security Forum with the spotlight on a keynote speech to be delivered by U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Yoon-jin has the details.
South Korean Defense Minister An Gyu-baek will travel to Singapore this week to attend the annual Asia Security Summit, dubbed the Shangri-La Dialogue, from Friday through Sunday. According to the Ministry of National Defense on Thursday, An plans to deliver a speech to the plenary session to introduce Korea's defense policy during the current increasingly volatile security landscape. Joining the summit will be his counterparts from key nations, including the United States, Japan, and other European and Indo-Pacific partners. Vietnam's President To Lam is set to deliver the keynote speech on the first day of the forum on Friday. But the most anticipated event will be the keynote address from U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, set to be delivered the following day with high scrutiny expected from Asian allies. It will serve as an important gauge of where U.S.-China relations stand, whether the recent talks between Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping helped stabilize bilateral relations, and further Washington's security commitments to the Asian region as the Iran war enters its 4th month. Meanwhile, according to Bloomberg, Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun is likely to be absent from the forum for a second consecutive year, reducing hopes for a high-level meeting between Beijing and Washington on the sidelines. China is reportedly highly likely to dispatch a delegation from the People's Liberation Army National Defense University instead, as it did last year. Along with the Iran war and Washington's strained commitment in Asia, rising tensions over Taiwan are likely to top the agenda for this year's meeting. Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
We're expecting bright and sunny weather across much of the country tomorrow. And with temperatures on the rise, it'll feel a lot more like early summer for the next few days. Strong winds have been sweeping across much of the country since this afternoon, with gusts reaching over 50 meters per second in many areas. So be sure to stay cautious of any safety hazards. Meanwhile, ozone levels are expected to briefly rise tomorrow afternoon across much of the central and southern parts of the country due to overseas inflow and strong sunlight. UV levels will stay very high across most of the country, with southern regions and Jeju Island possibly reaching extreme levels during the noon and 3 p.m. hours. So if you can, it's best to stay out of the sun during the hottest part of the day and try to limit long hours outdoors. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 17 degrees Celsius, Daejeon at 15 degrees, Gwangju at 16 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 28 degrees, while Daejeon, Daegu, and Gwangju will all top out at 27 degrees. Looking ahead to the weekend, clear skies are expected across most of the country, but mornings and evenings will still feel noticeably cooler, so keep a light jacket handy.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.